Well, let's hear what two political journalists thought of those performances. Sonia Soda is from The Observer, and we've got Tom Harwood as well, who is from Guido Fawkes. Morning, both of you. I don't know how much sleep you got last night. Maybe you were buzzing after the Andrew Neil interviews. But I wonder, I know, Sonia, you wouldn't classify yourself as a Conservative, but you would prefer to see Jeremy Hunt perhaps win this contest. Where do you think...
Well, I think he's the lesser of two evils.
OK, so that's how you would put it. Where do you think he was most wobbly last night?
Jeremy Hunt. So I think it was when Andrew Neil was pressing him for a date on which Britain would leave the EU. I think Jeremy Hunt was right not to give a firm answer on that, though, because of course it doesn't just depend on us. I do have to say that I think both of the interviews last night confirmed that both of these men are living in fantasy land when it comes to Brexit. Jeremy Hunt because he thinks he's going to get a renegotiated withdrawal deal, but of course if that's what you want to do, you can't give a guaranteed date. The EU has, however, said that they're not going to be reopening that agreement. And then Boris Johnson is in fantasy land because he seems to think, you know, a no-deal Brexit, we could carry on trading without tariffs. And I think he got very exposed on that by Andrew Neil yesterday evening.
Well, you shake your head, Tom Harwood, but there was quite a wobble, wasn't there, around the whole 5B/5C element of GATT24. Now, for our listeners just waking up at whatever 11 minutes past 7 on a Saturday morning, can you explain what that's all about and why it's significant?
Sure. GATT24 5B is a mechanism by which two countries can continue to trade or can trade on zero tariff terms, and 5C, all that sets out is that reciprocation is required, which Boris Johnson has acknowledged and said repeatedly throughout the course of this campaign. So I think it was a bit of a silly point to drag him up on.
Well, he does seem to base his plans on a bit of a wing and a prayer and this overriding sense of optimism, which, to be fair, may well be what voters want to hear right now. But he is lacking a bit on sort of concrete detail, isn't he?
I'm not sure. I don't think you have to memorise treaties in order to be on top of the detail. These are things that Boris has acknowledged over the course of this campaign, and there's a reason why he's soaring ahead in almost all of the polls. He's looking like he's going to get over 60% of the vote, and it's easy to see why when you watch the performance last night. He was the only candidate to actually hit out against the Labour Party. He was the only person to take the fight to Jeremy Corbyn, and that really shows his strong record of winning in the past, in the Brexit referendum, twice in London, these wins that everyone thought would not possibly be achieved, and he has turned out and inspired people and got people out to vote, and that's what people are looking for in this contest, a vote winner.
And Sonia, that's what's going to be in the mind of all the Conservative Party members who are voting in this leadership contest. They want to back a winner. There is a sense that they think Boris Johnson is the man to do that. Although, interestingly, not as many people have already voted as we thought would have done by this stage in the contest. So it does seem like there are still votes up for grabs.
That's true. I think this is very much Boris Johnson's contest to lose, though, as lots of people have said. I think, of course, there were fewer votes that have been cast than people might have been expected, but I really think the chances of Jeremy Hunt winning this are slim. Two things I want to pick up Tom on, though. First of all, Boris Johnson did come out at first and say, it's fine, we can crash out with no deal and we will be able to trade without tariffs. So Andrew Neil was absolutely right to pick him up on that. The other thing is that Boris Johnson is not surging ahead in the polls that count. Fine, he might be doing very well with Conservative members, but actually when you look at polling of voters in general, it's Jeremy Hunt who's been pulling ahead, and I think that's because voters who aren't Conservative supporters, people like me, they watch Boris Johnson's performance in these debates, in these interviews. He comes across as blustering, someone not on top of the detail, a bit of a bully, in fact, the way he conducts himself in these debates and interviews, and it's just not appealing to voters in general, swing voters, the people that Boris Johnson is going to need to win over if he becomes Prime Minister and goes up against Jeremy Corbyn.
That's not true. There was a Comres poll just this week that showed that Jeremy Hunt would deliver a hung parliament and Boris Johnson would deliver a 50-seat majority.
That's Jeremy not where the balance of
Jeremy
polls are,
Hunt
though.
might be appealing to people who would never, ever vote Conservative in their lives, but where it counts, Boris Johnson's ahead.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, both these candidates are going to be subject to the will of the EU27 for a start, and whatever that side determines to negotiate, but also the will of Parliament as well. So they're going to be heavily restricted in whatever they set out to achieve.
I'm not so sure. So Boris Johnson has said that he'd keep almost everything on the table in terms of dealing with Parliament, in the same way that Remainers in Parliament have made unprecedented moves, going against history and precedent in order to get their point across. Jeremy Hunt has taken some crucial tactics off the table, meaning it will be harder for him to deal with Parliament, harder for him to get through his policy agenda. So Boris is really miles ahead in this front in terms of keeping crucial tactics on the table.
I think some of those crucial tactics that Tom is talking about is the proroguing of Parliament, which is would be absolutely unprecedented, completely
It's happened
undemocratic.
lots before.
No, that's not true. Not in these sorts of
it.
circumstances. And it would be, it's ironic because actually what people like Boris Johnson said during the EU referendum campaign was leaving the EU is about giving control back to Parliament. And now he wants to shut Parliament down because Parliament isn't willing to support the catastrophic crashing out of the EU that Boris Johnson, we know that he would contemplate. John Major, former Conservative Prime Minister, in an interview last week, said that if Boris Johnson did this, he would take him to court. And that was absolutely the right thing to do. And I think the fact that Boris Johnson faces that kind of opposition from a former Conservative Prime Minister shows you just how crazy his plans are.
Is this the same John Major who prorogued Parliament in 1997 to get out of a Cash for Questions scandal? And the hypocrisy is huge.
Calling a general election is not proroguing Parliament.
The hypocrisy on some of the Remain side is huge. John Major has been really undignified over the last few years, especially since the referendum. He's in this sort of Heseltine camp, whoever's trying to deliver Brexit, he will hit out against. I'm not sure this is representative of the Tory party or the country.
For now, we're going to have to leave the two of you to sort this out. Thank you very much indeed for your time this early on a Saturday morning, Tom and Sonia.
I suspect that conversation may continue for a little while. We'll keep an eye on it.